Are you looking for inspiring conversations about faith, film, and life? You're in the right place. Here's the host who knows the right questions to ask, Father Edward Looney.
Hey everybody, it's Father Edward. Grateful you're tuning in for another episode of the podcast. And I've had Teresa Tomeo, a veteran Catholic journalist, on once before. She talked about reclaiming Sunday and the value of the Sabbath. And today, though, I'm very excited to be speaking with her about Italy because she brings groups to Italy, she organizes trips, and she has a new book called Italy's Shrines and Wonders. And what's interesting to me about this conversation is I've never been to Italy. People are always shocked by that. I've been a priest 10 years. I've never made it to Italy. I was supposed to go in 2020, but with COVID, that didn't happen. So I've been to France and Spain, and I've been all over Europe, but not to Italy. So I'm very much looking forward to my own trip in September. And so I think this conversation is going to help me as much as it might help you. And of course, we have the new Jubilee Year of 2025. And so lots of pilgrims will be venturing to Italy for the sake of the Jubilee. And so I think this is a timely book, a timely conversation. So thanks so much, Teresa, for joining me today.
Thanks, Father. It's great to be with you again. And yeah, you have got to get to Italy. We have got to change that. You have got to get that make that happen very quickly, especially the Jubilee year.
Yeah, most definitely. And of course, there's special indulgences. And, it's a time when people are supposed to go to Rome. So these Jubilees every 25 years. I'm curious, how many times in your life have you been to Italy?
It's approaching probably 70 times now between all the tours that my husband and I have been leading since 2002 and working obviously with EWTN and going to conferences as a delegate from the United States to the Vatican many times. So it's getting close to now 70, may even be more than that. I lost track of it, but yeah, we've been there approaching 100 times now to Italy.
And what is your fascination with Italy? I'm assuming it's partly because it's your heritage,
right.
And so it's ethnicity and such. But what else is there that captures you about this country?
Well, first and foremost, it's because it's the home of the Holy See and the Vatican, and the faith is everywhere, even though in many areas of Italy, the Catholics there are still struggling. There's a lot of fallen away Catholics, and that's no surprise. It's not exactly a newsflash happening in many places of Europe. But the other thing is the beauty constantly brings me back to God. And the first time my husband and I landed on Italian-American soil, and we're both FBIs, full-blooded Italian, we just felt like we were home for so many reasons, because of our heritage, but also because of the Catholic faith. Because even though Italians may not practice it as regularly as they should, they still recognize the importance of the church, and they're very Marian. And you would be interested in this as a Marian priest. You have Marian shrines everywhere, and the Blessed Mother is still much loved and revered all over the country. So it was a combination of faith and heritage and the beauty. It's just, I've been all over the world like you, and I've had the opportunity. I love Spain. I've been there. I've been to France for Lourdes and other places in France as well. I've been to the Holy Land many times. I've been to Greece. I've been to Turkey. But nothing captures my heart and my husband's heart in particular like Italy.
Yeah, that's marvelous to hear. And, I'm sure each person, maybe it's a different country for them, but I love your passion for Italy and wanting to introduce people to a lot of these sites and holy places and some of the places even off the beaten path as well. So when it comes to a trip to Italy, you begin with Rome. Is that where you'd recommend people go first?
I would say begin with Rome, because what you're going to find in Rome, and I love the Eternal City. I mean, you've got the Vatican, you have the major basilicas, you have ancient Rome, the Colosseum and so much more, and so many other beautiful churches that you can visit. But you want to, I think, and I don't want to diminish it and kind of say get it out of the way, but it's very, very time consuming. And I want to be honest with people. And I say this in my book, and I say it in all my consultations. I have a travel Italy expert website where I consult with people and help them with itineraries and whatnot. Rome is very busy. And in the Jubilee year, they're expecting, I've heard two different numbers, 35 million. And then I was speaking with a representative from the Vatican Patrons of the Arts who was visiting our chapter in Michigan earlier in December. And he said they're hearing in Rome at the Vatican, it's going to be closer to 40 million. And that's just in Rome alone. So if you start in Rome, and if you haven't seen St. Peter's, if you haven't seen the major basilicas and the other major sites, the Pantheon, the Trevi Fountain, all the things you want to see, Piazza Navona, go and see that, spend a good couple of days there. But then go outside of Rome and go to Umbria, which is where my husband and I live part-time. Go up to Tuscany to do different sites. Maybe go to the region, explore the region of Lazio more outside of Rome. But I would start with Rome, because then you say, okay, now I've seen all the big stuff. Now I can go and I can explore elsewhere, because it is going to take a lot out of you to see Rome. And so then you can go and then you can rest afterwards. Maybe pick a cute little medieval village in Umbria to stay, or somewhere on the seacoast. But I would say start with Rome.
So the Roman itinerary, it would probably be St. Peter's. It'd be taking in a papal audience with the Holy Father. It'd be going to St. Mary Major. I know, at least for me, that's a place I definitely want to go.
Mm-hmm.
There's other basilicas, like the basilicas of St. Paul outside the wall, or
St. John Lateran. Yep.
St.
Mm-hmm.
John Lateran too. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so those are some of the probably must-see places. Are there other places that you'd recommend just to take in Rome beside the big places?
Well, there's all kinds of unique churches that you could see. There's St. Peter and Change, and there's the church where St. Paul was beheaded outside of Rome. There's many different places, and I talk about this in the book. But the other thing you want to do in Rome is, I wouldn't do more than one tour a day, because it's just, you're going to have to wait in line, even if you have a tour group, because it's so crowded. You want to give yourself the chance to do what the Italians call la dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing, where you have a tour in the afternoon. Maybe you have a tour in the morning, and then you have the afternoon off. Next day, you have a tour in the afternoon, you have the morning off, and then give yourself a whole day in between. And I encourage people to discover the neighborhoods of Rome. For example, two of my favorites, Trastevere, which is a very old section of Rome, great restaurants, and then Testaccio, which is not far from Trastevere, which is kind of like the up and coming Trastevere. There's a great, huge market there with all kinds of cute little restaurants and boutiques, and just a great place to hang out. I say, in addition to seeing all the religious sites, just relax and enjoy the city. And then I have a whole list of different churches that I recommend that people can visit, including the amazing Purgatory Church, which actually has Church of the Sacred Heart. It has a little museum dedicated to people who have reached out in purgatory, which is actually preserved by the church there. So there's all kinds of unique places. You can go see St. Teresa in Ecstasy, and that's over on the other side of Rome. That's an amazing thing to see. St. Patrick's is the American church, and you can visit there and hear Mass in English. I mean, I could go on and on, but so you start with the Vatican, Sistine Chapel, St. Peter's, right? And then you're going to go to the four major basilicas, the other major basilicas, St. Mary Major, St. John Lateran, St. Paul outside the walls. Tre Fontani, the three fountains, is where St. Paul was martyred. And again, some of the other churches I mentioned. But you want to see the Colosseum, you want to see the Forum, which is fascinating. Some of that you can even do on your own. But you want to give yourself, I tell people, for Rome, you have to give yourself at least 4 or 5 days. Otherwise, it's just going to be a whirlwind and your head's going to explode, because there's just so much to see there. It's crazy.
Well, it almost sounds like if you go during the Jubilee year, you're probably not going to see everything you want to see.
Right.
And you're going to have to go back on another trip. And maybe Rome is
Right.
a place that you have to explore a few different times in
Right.
order to come to appreciate it in its fullness. So a lot of people, they're going to go to Rome, and they're either going to maybe go with a tour company. Maybe they're going to go on one of the tours you lead. They're going to go with 206 or one of the popular companies out there. But there are people like me who we're going to go individually. We're going to book our own Delta Airlines flight to Rome. We're going to make our way to wherever we're staying, and we're just going to kind of do it by ourselves. Maybe you meet some friends in Rome. Like, I'll be there for a convention, and so there'll be other Americans I'm with. So maybe we will go and sightsee together. But I'm wondering, how amicable are the Italian people to people like me who maybe don't speak Italian, that are Americans? Like, sometimes you go to a foreign country and they're kind of like, they're off put by, the foreign intruder. So what's the friendliness to outsiders?
Oh, they're very friendly. As a matter of fact, the Italians are fascinated with America. It cracks me up, because I'm fascinated with Italy, and I want to do all things Italian. And when I meet Italians, they're like, "Oh, you're an Italian American. What's this city like? What's that city like? We love America. America's so big." And they're enthralled with it. The big cities like Chicago, New York City, Los Angeles, Las Vegas. They hear about all these things on the media. They're very friendly. And if you just try, and in my book, I give people a few phrases. For example, buongiorno for good morning, buonasera for good afternoon, grazie. I mean, there's a few little simple things you can say to show them that you're trying. But in big cities like Rome, because tourism is so prevalent, Father, most of the people, especially the wait staff, they speak English, and they speak it very well. And they want to speak English. The ones who are still learning the language, the older Italians, they want to speak more English, and they end up apologizing to us for not being able to speak English. And I'm apologizing to them because I can only, even though I'm 100% Italian, and my father, whose first language was Italian, tried to teach me when I was growing up. Of course, I wanted no part. I wasn't even interested. Now I can speak a little bit and understand it because I grew up hearing it. I'm apologizing to them for not speaking Italian. They're like, no, 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 we need to speak English, more smoothly. But they're so friendly. It's not a problem. But even if you try just a little bit with a few phrases, they'll appreciate it.
So I'm walking around the streets of Rome. It's dinner time. I need to find a place to eat. Do I just stumble into any Italian restaurant, or how do I find a place to get my dinner?
Well, first of all, dinner time in America and dinner time in Italy are extremely different. If you try to go to dinner at 6 o'clock, nothing's going to be open unless you go to like a pizza place that offers the individual slices of pizza. But you don't just walk into a restaurant anywhere in Italy, even in the smaller towns, because dinner is a big deal. Cena, they call it. Breakfast, of course, is colazione, and then lunch is pranzo, which is the biggest meal, and then dinner is cena. Dinner isn't usually until the earliest you can get a reservation, it's like 7:30, especially in the bigger cities. You need to make reservations. And again, I mean, there's so many different restaurants. I mean, I have a whole list of restaurants that I recommend. You don't want to go, this gives you a general idea, not to tout one restaurant over the other, but you don't want to go to the restaurants where they're trying to flag you down on the street and handing you a menu and telling you to sit down right away. That is a sure sign that it's a tourist trap. What you want to do is maybe ask the people in your hotel where you're staying, if you don't already have some restaurants in mind, okay, recommend a good local restaurant, because what you're going to find in Rome is among the best pasta in all of Italy, because you've got the carbonara, you've got the matriciana, and those famous pastas, the cacio e pepe, the pepper and cheese pasta. That's what Rome is known for. So if you don't have any restaurants in mind, which you should before you go, and my book can help you with that, with which areas to go to, you really need to talk to a local about it, because you want to go where the locals eat. You don't just wander into a restaurant. You have to have reservations. It's just not possible. It's too crowded, especially before you go. I tell my clients at Tease Italy, you need to make reservations to restaurants at least a week in advance before you get there, or else you're never going to get into a restaurant. It's just a fact of life.
Wow. That's something I wouldn't have anticipated. So that's good to know.
Yeah.
So we've seen Rome, we've taken in all the major sites in Rome. Now it's time to go somewhere else. So do I rent a car? Do I take the train? What's the best mode of transportation?
Well, if you're not afraid of driving and you're not driving in the big cities, which I don't recommend, I would say your best bet would be to rent a car, because it gives you so many options. Now, you could hire a driver, and there's all kinds of great drivers available. And I work with a wonderful travel agency, corporate travel service, that is southeastern Michigan, who also can help people arrange a trip, which I do as well. But I really recommend renting a car, because that gives you the freedom to go and maybe drive up to Assisi. And before you get to Assisi, stop in Orvieto or Greccio or Viterbo, the city of the popes, or where they held the first papal conclave. It just gives you a nice option. And once you're outside of the city, the driving is much like driving in the United States. So they do drive much faster in Italy than they do here. But what I recommend is, if you're staying in Rome, if you're in the city, and this is a little trick that my husband and I have learned, take a cab, go back to the airport, rent your car at the airport, and then you avoid all that inner city traffic, because you don't want to have a car in Rome and have to pay for parking in Rome and then try to get out of the city, which is not easy if you've never driven in Rome. So you get your car at the airport, and then you can drive wherever you want to drive, and then just take it back to Fiumicino, the main airport in Rome, and dump it off there at the end of your trip. So if you come and do Rome first, then go back to the airport, or maybe somewhere outside the city, but it's much easier to get to the airport because the cabs go there all the time, and they have a lot of great options for car rentals in the airport. And you go there, rent it, and then bring it back, and then you're on your way home.
So one of the places people recommend, of course, is Assisi. St.
Right.
Francis of Assisi is one of the most popular saints. Now we have Blessed Carlo Acutis, who will be Saint Carlo Acutis. He is entombed and enshrined in the Basilica in Assisi.
St. Mary Major. Yeah, St. Mary Major. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, what's there to do in Assisi? People say it's the most peaceful place. They love Assisi. So, what should I do in Assisi? And why do you think Assisi has that characterization of being so peaceful?
Well, a couple of points about Assisi. First of all, it's a place that has really been able to maintain, because of the good care they've taken of the town, its medieval feel. And Assisi is in the region of Umbria, which is about 2 hours. Lazio is where Rome is. And so you venture out of Lazio and you go into Umbria, which is my favorite region of Italy. My husband and I took the plunge and bought a small place there a couple of years ago. And Assisi is one of the most gorgeous medieval villages, but Umbria itself is a place you want to visit in addition to Assisi because it has the most medieval villages in all of Italy. So Assisi obviously is the birthplace of St. Francis and St. Clare. So first of all, you have those two amazing basilicas, Santa Chiara's, and then you have San Francesco. So you have the tombs of these two great saints who were very good friends and worked together. And St. Clare, we know the story of her, how she was influenced by St. Francis when she heard him preach. You also have St. Mary of the Angels, which is in Lower Assisi, which houses the Pontiucola. That is the little portion church, which served as the Franciscans' headquarters for so many years, and also where St. Francis is cell, where he died. And the garden that has very special roses that only bloom in that portion of Italy. It's a whole story we don't have time to get into for that. And then in addition to that, in addition to St. Francis, St. Clare, you have San Rufino, which is a big main church in Assisi for people who live there. The heart of Carlo Acutis is there. The baptismal font is in San Rufino, where St. Francis was baptized. And then there's more, as that old Prego, sauce commercial used to say, it's all in there. You go to the top of the mountain, San Subasio is the mountain on which Assisi is built. And there's a beautiful hermitage that many people ignore. You can take a cab ride up there, way, 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 way up on top of the mountain. And it's absolutely gorgeous. And there's Stations of the Cross. There's a hermitage where St. Francis spent a lot of time. So I think you need more than a day in Assisi because you need to be able to walk into the basilicas like St. Francis, for example, in the upper basilica with all the frescoes, which are phenomenal. And then you have the main, there's like 3 layers in the Church of San Francesco. You have the upper basilica with all the frescoes. You have the kind of the middle layer where you have a part of the main sanctuary. There's amazing frescoes there as well. On one side, it's a Life of Christ, and the other side, it's St. Francis. And you go down to the crypt. So there's like 3 levels in St. Francis. And then St. Clare's church is beautiful. The cross that spoke to St. Francis, the San Damiano cross, interestingly enough, is not in San Francesco, but it's in the Church of St. Clare. So that alone, to go into the chapel, the minute you walk into St. Clare's, they direct you over to the right, and you see the San Damiano cross. And then you can go downstairs, and you can venerate the relics of Santa Chiara. And then they have a whole section, Father, which would really interest you, of vestments of St. Francis, the hair of St. Clare, some of her vestments. They have actually the grate that she was behind when she spoke, because they were cloistered by Poor Clares. And they have her rule there. And they have some of the socks worn by St. Francis with blood from the stigmata. I mean, it's an amazing reliquary there, a huge, huge section of relics from these 2 great saints. So it's not the type of place, even though people say, well, I'm going to make a day trip to Assisi. People do that all the time, but there's just too much to see, especially as Catholics. And if you love St. Francis, you want to be in this town. It's just so beautiful. And at night, it becomes a whole different place because all the tourists who are there for day trips leave. And it's a lovely, lovely town at night and many wonderful restaurants. So I would really recommend at least 2 nights in Assisi, if not more. Because when you're in Assisi, then you can venture off to, let's say, Spoleto. And Spoleto actually has a reliquary in their cathedral that has one of the few handwritten letters that St. Francis wrote to one of his brothers. And you also have other things in Spoleto. It has amazing architecture associated with the Romans. There's Gubbio that's not too far away. That would be to the north, which is my favorite town in all of Umbria. And that's associated with the Wolf of Gubbio and St. Francis. So I could go on, but if you're going to go see Assisi, you want to give yourself some time. And I would even recommend, even though Assisi is beautiful, it is very, very busy. I have to say this. We live in a village, Father, that only has 200 people. Our little village is about 30 minutes southwest of Assisi. It's so peaceful. I mean, there's a little church there, and there's 200 residents, and that's it. And there's church bells, and there's countryside, and it's gorgeous. I'm so accustomed now, even though I'm from the big city, to living life in a small town in Italy, that when I go to Assisi, it makes me nervous because there's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of taxis and people coming in and out and tour groups. So I would say stay somewhere close to Assisi, but maybe stay overnight somewhere else. So that's just my personal opinion. But some people want the experience of staying at Assisi, which is fine. It's great to do, but it's busy. It is a tourist town because remember, St. Francis is not only much loved by Catholics, but environmentalists and people who love animals. And so he's extremely popular. And so you're going to get all kinds of tour groups in Assisi on any given day.
Yeah. Wow. So we talked about those two beloved saints of Italy. But of course, there are other saints. And kind of the thing I've realized is that all the places I want to go, I'm not going to have time to go to. Like, it's just too far, like to get from point A to point B. Like, I would love to go to Pietrelcina or San Giovanni Rotonda, but for Padre Pio, but I just don't think it's going to be possible this time around. So, but
If you have a car, it would be possible. You just have to plan your trip carefully. And this is what I tell people. You need at least 2 weeks in Italy. You can't just go. And I know you have a schedule as a pastor and you have a parish, so it might be a little bit different for you. But if you're going to be over there, don't just do it in a week. It's not enough time because
yeah,
first of all, when you go across the pond, depending on where you're flying from the United States, it's anywhere from 8 to 12 hours. So you have to consider that when you get there, there is going to be jet lag. I don't care what you say. And I fly there all the time, 2 or 3 times a year. I'm an experienced traveler. There's still jet lag. You need a day to recover. Okay. Then you have to get the day to get back to the airport. So you've got 2 days that are accounted for travel. And if you're only going for a week, it only gives you 5 days. That is not enough. You
yeah.
have to do at least 2 weeks. And San Giovanni Rotondo is possible, but I think if you're looking at going down to Puglia, which is another place that is on my favorite places in Italy, is don't just stop at San Giovanni Rotondo in the Cave of St. Michael. A lot of Catholics make that mistake. They just go see
Sure.
Padre Pio, which is awesome, but they don't venture south in Puglia, which is incredible. The heel of Italy. St. Nicholas is buried in Bari. You have Matera, which is one of the most ancient cities in the world where the Passion of the Christ was shot. You have the adorable Albero Bello, little Trulli houses, the cone-shaped houses that are just so fantastic. And you have so many other religious places to see in Puglia. So you want to have a variety and you want to do the basics, but you also want to experience Italy, as I say in my book, off the beaten path. Most people, when they go to Italy, they go to Rome, Florence, Assisi, Venice. Okay, that's great. But it all depends on the time of year you go, because if you're going in the summertime, it is going to be a nightmare. It's going to be overcrowded. You're not going to be able to see everything. It's going to be too crowded. So really consider going. The best time to go is early spring, like actually even before spring starts in March is great, before Easter. And then I say in the late fall. That's why we do all of our trips with Tees Italy in October. We have 2 trips coming up, by the way, with corporate travel. We have a marriage trip coming up in Umbria, and we have a women's trip coming up in October to Rome, Venice, and Florence. So that's on my website, teresatomeo.com. But don't rush it. Give yourself time. You're spending all that money to get over there. And I had a client a couple of weeks ago, right before Christmas, and they said to me, well, here's our itinerary, and we're not really looking at changing it. We just want your advice. And Father, I got tired hearing their itinerary. They got off the plane. They went to the Vatican. Then they drove to Assisi the next day. On the way to Assisi, they went to the town of Todi. They went to Narni. They went to Orvieto. Then they went to Assisi. Then they went back to Rome, got on a cruise ship, went all over, had tours every day, and they were coming back to Italy for more tours. My head was exploding. And I said, look, you're paying me for my advice. You're not going to remember anything because you're packing too much into this trip. Because people think they can go and they can do all these things in a matter of a week, and you just can't. Italy is meant to be savored. And that's a big portion of my book, talking about La Dolce Far Niente and giving yourself time to reflect and be like Our Lady and ponder the beauty that you're seeing.
What about Saint Philomena? Do you know where she is? Like, is that possible from a trip to Rome?
I'm not sure where Saint Philomena is buried, but I think if what you have to do is you have to sit down. I mean, there's so many saints all over Italy, and it's interesting because some of the relics in particular have been moved to different places. So it's you have to kind of keep up with the church and what they're doing. But what's important is to sit down before you go and say, what is a must see for me? If you've never been to Italy before, what do I really want to see? Make a list, put everything on your bucket list. What's most important? And then you have to highlight some of the other areas that are super important to you, in addition to obviously seeing the Vatican, seeing Sistine Chapel, major basilicas. What else do I want to do? What saint do I love a lot? And how am I going to get there? It's possible if you plan ahead. The most important thing is to be realistic and to look at the distance. And Italy, I mean, it's not that big, but if you're going to be going to, let's say, Puglia from Rome, it's going to take you a good 4 or 5 hours to drive down there. So that's a good half a day. By the
And what's
time you
in
get
Puglia?
there, that's San Giovanni Rotondo, where
Okay.
Padre Pio is, and St.
Okay.
Michael's Cave in Gargano. So you could if you left at like 7 o'clock in the morning, you get there by noon, you'd have lunch, and you could go see the churches and then go to St. Michael's the next day. and then move down and go somewhere else. It's just a matter of planning. Most people, their eyes are bigger, their travel eyes are bigger than their stomachs, and they don't realize what they have to do to get to these various places. But if a saint is important to you, just look it up. Where is she buried or he is buried? And then figure out where you're going to be and then plan around it and give yourself enough time to spend at the church and the tomb of a much loved saint.
What's a place, in all of Italy, so we're talking all the different regions, but that maybe someone hasn't heard of, but you definitely think is worth visiting?
Oh my gosh, that is a great question. There's so many regions. Well, I would think Umbria, where my husband and I live, even though our heritage is not from there, our heritage is from the south, because Umbria is known as the Porta Verde, the green heart of Italy. And so it's considered one of the most beautiful places, and it has so many great restaurants. And I mean, there's all great restaurants all over Italy, but Umbria is kind of undiscovered. It's the other Tuscany, because Tuscany has Madison Avenue in Hollywood, right, and Netflix, or maybe the Amalfi Coast as well. But I would say spending time in Umbria, not too far from Umbria, is a beautiful region of La Marche, which is part inland and then part on the coast, which is kind of a new up and coming place for Europeans to go. And also another great area where my husband's family is from, if you like nature. And there's also the Eucharistic Miracle of Lanciano there. There's some great places. But if you love nature and if you love parks, even if you don't hike too much and just want to experience nature, the region of Abruzzo, which is along the Adriatic coast north of Puglia, where Padre Pio is from. I also love where my mom's family is from, another undiscovered region, which is gorgeous, is Basilicata. And Basilicata is, if you're looking at a map of Italy and you see the toe, if you go all the way up to Calabria and just slightly over, it branches over into Puglia, kind of is between Calabria and Puglia. And there's a little piece of land in Basilicata that's on the ocean. But Basilicata has so much farmland and some of the most beautiful mountaintop villages in all of Italy. And it also is the home of Matera, the ancient city, which is a definite must-see on your bucket list. So those are a few of the regions. There's 20 regions in all of Italy. I covered most of them in my book. Another area which is beautiful is way northeast, the Veneto, or over on the Ligurian coast, outside of Portofino, outside of Cinque Terre, those areas. But to go outside those places that are so overly populated with tourists and to explore the different places of Italy. It's endless. I mean, that's why the book, Father, was 416 pages, and I'd covered extensively 14 of the 20 regions of Italy. And the other 6, I kind of just summarized briefly. So there's probably another book or 2 or 3 in me, because I'm typing this book and I'm saying to my husband, Deacon Dom, I don't know where to end, because you could just do 400 pages, for example, on Lazio. I mean, Lazio is phenomenal. Most people stay in Rome because that's where, Lazio is the home of the eternal city of Rome. But you've got Bracciano, which is a lake. You've got Viterbo, which is the city of the popes. You have Greccio, where St. Francis established the first nativity, which is phenomenal, stunning. I could go on and on about Lazio. And you go to the south and you've got Frascati, which is great white wine. You have Lake Albano and Castel Gandolfo, that town down there with the Papal Palace and the Vatican Gardens. It's just mind-blowing what you can see in Italy and how beautiful it is. And we've been going there for 25 years. And as I mentioned, I've been there at least 70 times, if not more. And I've only just begun to scratch the surface. And I wrote a book over 400 pages, and there's just so much there. It's just such an incredible country. I just say God was just showing off when he made Italy. It's like, I'm God, and I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to give you the food. I'm going to give you the land. I'm going to give you the architecture. I'm going to give you the art. Here you go. It'll blow your mind, really.
One of the things you said when we were talking about St. Francis of Assisi is that, he's beloved by environmentalists and
Right.
animal lovers and all that. So
Right.
lots of people are going there. So you get all of these people of different ways of life and everything like that. And they're coming to Italy and they're encountering sanctuaries, they're encountering God, they're encountering beauty. And I think of, I know of Protestant pastors that have gone on pilgrimage, on a trip to Rome. And it just kind of mind boggles me. Like, how do you go and experience all of these sites of Catholicism, but you don't become a Catholic, So how do you think a trip to Italy, and this could be for your lapsed Catholic, for your Catholic who doesn't take their faith seriously, for your devout Catholic, but like, And for the non-Catholic, like all of these people, how is a trip to Italy enriching one's faith and devotion to God?
Well, that's a great question. And here's the thing, even though we may not see a response right away from someone who is, let's say they don't have any faith at all. Maybe they grew up in an agnostic or atheistic household. Or religion wasn't really a big thing for the family, even if they're not anti-God or anything. Or maybe they're a fallen away Catholic, or maybe they're a Protestant brother or sister. You can't deny the fact that somehow, at some point, we may not see it, they're going to be impacted because the beauty is so intense. When you walk into, for example, even when you walk up the Via della Conciliazione, the main street leading up to the Vatican, and you look at St. Peter's, the colonnade, and then you go in and you see, the main area of the church, and to the right you see the Pietà, and you look at the detail of the Pietà, and then you get to the Sistine Chapel. And then you go to the other major basilicas, which St. Mary Major's, which will blow your mind with it. It's just phenomenal. You can't help but look up and think, first of all, and I say this in my book, how did they, whomever they were, whichever artists we're speaking of, how did they do that? How did they do that? These are people that had extraordinary gifts. Well, where did they get those gifts from? So it's a process that people go through. So even if we don't see it, you can see the awe in the people when they're looking at the art and a beauty eventually, as we both know. Bishop Barron talks a lot about this, and I mentioned that, quote him in my book. It is eventually going to lead you to the good, which is going to lead you to the truth. And so it may take time for some people, but for example, sometimes it's instantaneous. So we had 3 people on our last trip, the Deacon Dom and I did last year in the fall, and it was called Italy Coast to Coast. We call it La Dolce Fede, the sweetness of faith. And we did the Amalfi Coast and the Adriatic Coast. And then, of course, we did all fabulous churches and whatnot and fun experiences. We had 3 people tell us privately that they were coming back to the church after the experience they had. It was a combination of the art, the beauty of Italy, and it was a combination of the fellowship. And this is why I really recommend people to think about a tour or a pilgrimage. It's a fellowship on that bus where people come together. They all want to see Italy, and the friendships and having Mass celebrated, even if you're not, let's say, a practicing Catholic or a fallen away Catholic, having Mass celebrated in these great churches does something to you. And individually, 3 people came up to us. One man was married to a wonderful woman who's a devout Catholic. He was an anti-Catholic. He was just fallen away, hadn't practiced in a while. And he said, I let my wife plan this whole trip. And he said, this blew my mind in terms of the quality of the trip. He said, but the beauty and the faith, he said, I'm going back to the church. Another woman who was totally fallen away came up to us crying, say it was a life changer for her. And then we had another person say pretty much the same thing, that their life had been just completely turned around by the trip, by being there in these churches. So we never know. But again, I think eventually there's going to be a lot of people that are converting or reverting that have been to Italy, because you can't go and see something as beautiful as the Pietà or the Sistine Chapel or the Duomo in Florence or the magnificent Duomo in Orvieto, which is crazy gorgeous, and just say, oh, that's nice, and then go back home. I don't believe that for a minute. We may never see it, but I don't believe people are not impacted. So I always pray. And my prayer, and this is what I was telling you before we started recording, to pray for this book, because part of the reason, the big reason I wrote it, was for stealth evangelization. Everybody loves Italy, Father. And I do consultations for all kinds of people, most of whom are Catholic and listen to me on Catholic radio. But I'm doing more and more secular consultations. And everybody loves Italy. And this is a backdoor way to introduce or reintroduce people to God.
Yeah, you go to one of the Eucharistic miracle sites and you witness the body and blood. Truly this bread and wine has become body and blood, not only just in the sacramental sense that we talk about, but literally you see the miracle. Like, how can you not believe? So,
Yep.
Italy is a treasure chest of saints and miracles, shrines and wonders, as your book is titled, Italy's Shrines and Wonders. So if people want to learn more about you, you mentioned your website earlier and also your travel consultation and such.
Yeah.
So just give those links all again, so they're all in one place for everybody, so that maybe if they're interested in learning more about Italy, they'll buy your book, they'll consult with you, maybe they'll sign up for a pilgrimage.
I sure hope so. And even if they don't have any plans, Father, to go to Italy for the Jubilee Year or even beyond that, I would get the book, because it's a treasure trove of all kinds of great information. I even have recipes from my own kitchen in there from across Italy, signature dishes and celebrations, different festivals across Italy. We have maps. We have all kinds of ideas on how to plan the best trip. 14 of the 20 regions are covered. 6 are covered in the last chapter. You've got references, you've got resources, beautiful photographs. Just, it's really a pretty book. And in addition to the book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders, through EWTN, I'm doing a free online Learn course that will be offered in the spring. And so it will be a 6 or 7 part series where I'm actually filming. I filmed on location with our Rome crew from EWTN. So that'll be coming out in 2025 this year as well. So best thing to do is for the book, you can go to the EWTN catalog, EWTNRC.com, which stands for Religious Catalog, or to my website, which is teresatomeo.com, Teresa without an H, and go to the book section. I also have for consultations, if you're interested in going to Italy, that would be travelitalyexpert.com. And again, I would love to see some of the folks join us for our 2 pilgrimages coming up in the fall, in October of 2025, the women's pilgrimage in early October and the couples pilgrimage in late October. So again, teresatomeo.com, travelitalyexpert.com, and EWTNRC.com to buy the book.
Well, this has been a wealth of information. You already have me wanting to map out my trip in September. And now I know I'll have to make my dinner reservations in advance. So thanks so much, Teresa, for the conversation today and for all the insights you gave me. And I'm sure lots of people who are going to Italy will benefit from this wisdom that you've imparted to us today in this conversation, and that they will find when they pick up your book, Italy's Shrines and Wonders. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Father. Thanks. Ciao.
If you liked today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. And don't forget to stay up to date with what Father Edward is doing by following him on Facebook, X, or Instagram at the handle @FrEdwardLooney. Thanks for listening, and please join Father Edward again next time for another inspiring conversation.